Slave ship mutinies. Slave vessels were meticulously crafted and equipped to counter African resistance. Since the inception of the trade, it was evident that even in their terror, African captives would seize any chance to regain their freedom. Africans endeavored to escape even before reaching the coast, evading their captors whenever possible. However, on board a ship, escape became markedly more challenging. While the slave ship was moored on the coast, European sailors loaded captives sporadically until the ship reached full capacity or it was time to set sail. The crew of the slave ship initiated the practice of segregating men from women and children when detaining them in the forts, castles, and coastal barracoons. This practice of dividing African captives by gender endured on the slave ships. Initially, the initial Africans brought on board might have been granted some degree of freedom of movement. Yet, as the number of captives swelled and the crew found themselves vastly outnumbered, the ship metamorphosed into a floating prison. It was at this juncture that the crew employed chains, manacles, and padlocks fashioned by European craftsmen, primarily to fetter the adult males, who were corralled in groups and confined below decks as the captive count grew. By and large, women and children enjoyed greater freedom of movement and were not tethered together unless they posed a perceived threat to the crew. In spite of the presence of chains, shackles, and other implements of confinement carried by the captain and crew on all slave ships, Africans demonstrated resourcefulness and resistance. The weeks or months spent on the African coast, as the ship filled with slaves, constituted a perilous phase for the crew. When the Africans could discern their homeland, and boats ferried captives between the ship and land, open resistance frequently erupted. Roughly 1 in 10 slave ships encountered some form of African resistance, with a markedly higher rate for vessels embarking captives in Senegambia, which witnessed the highest incidence of shipboard rebellions in any African region. Shipboard resistance spanned from isolated acts of defiance or fatal attempts to leap overboard to significant revolts that escalated into life and death clashes between Africans and sailors. For example, the enslaved individuals aboard the Clare orchestrated a successful mutiny, expelling the crew and securing their liberation near Cape Coast Castle on the Gold Coast in 1729. African rebels underwent a ritual of gruesome punishments and execution, all fashioned to serve as a chilling example to survivors of the inescapable fate of defeated insurgents. Thanks for watching. The end.